This conference will now be recorded.
So I will call into order the Community Preservation Committee for Tuesday, the 24th of February. As the little computer voice just said, the meeting is being recorded. And I will start by taking a roll call for the record. Heather Highmark.
Here.
And Andrew Lau.
Here.
And Tatiana.
Here.
Christina Kennedy.
Here.
Eleanor Rances.
Here.
Alan Bingham.
Yes.
Jahan Habib, sorry.
Here.
And that is everybody on the committee. We have Judith, right? And Alan here as well. And with that, I will just note that we have a couple quickie announcements. Ribbon cutting at Central Hill Park coming up on Friday the 5th at 11. And with, as I mentioned earlier, with this lovely spring day, it's something to look forward to for all of us. And obviously anybody's welcome to come. And with that, I will ask if we have any public comments. Okay. Hearing none, I'm going to move on to review of the minutes from January, which Judith sent out, and ask if there are any comments or edits to be made. Anyone? Okay, yeah, I thought they looked fine also. With that, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the January meeting?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second that. This is Heather.
Great, okay. Motion made by Eleanor to approve the minutes, seconded by Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
That's Eleanor. Aye for me. Heather?
Aye.
And Andrew?
Aye.
And Tatiana?
Tatiana is on mute.
Okay. Okay. Tatiana, can you unmute yourself?
Did you not hear me before?
I didn't,
Sorry.
yeah. Okay, so you passed the minutes, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, and Christina?
Yes.
And Eleanor?
Aye.
And Alan? And
I abstain because I wasn't here.
fair enough, and Jahan?
I also abstain as I was in part of the meeting.
Okay. With that, I would say it passes, and we will move on to the Somerville Museum's request.
Yeah, so we have Barbara with us. So Barbara will make the request from the museum.
Yes. Hi. First of all, thank you for letting me come before you again. As you know, I have requested this change in the scope for the FY 21 pending award. I know you all have all passed it, but it hasn't gone through all the other channels. I think it's still waiting on that. But my understanding is that we were awarded about $87,000 for collection care, and that now we have been progressing on the building and doing the Access for All elevator addition. And so I wanted to show you these photos that will just give you a sense as to where we are. We've already done a significant amount of demolition on the interior, and the placement for the handicap restrooms has been created. And so the team, which is Stack Design Build Company, turned their attention to the exterior because all the other work that they need to do requires this facade, parts of it anyway, to come down. And so they were taking down the porch. Judith, are you controlling the PowerPoint? Because I don't think I am. It's just going on its own.
Yes, I am. Do you want me to go back to the first picture?
Yeah, if you could just wait until I kind of tell you to go on, that would be great.
Okay.
So I'll
Okay,
just go
thank
back
you.
to the first one. I'll try to be quick. I know you all have a lot to get through tonight. There you go. So this is the removal of the Westwood Road porch. For those of you who've been to the museum, you'll see this is the main entrance to the museum.
Sorry, Barbara.
yeah.
Can I request for everyone to mute? Thank you.
Great. Okay. So this was bringing in heavy equipment to get rid of the porch. Okay, next slide, Judith. Okay, here you see the porch has been demolished. Next slide. This is just looking at it from a point of view of where the design build company wanted to bring in a very large piece of equipment and start drilling down about 14 feet. This would be for shoring the museum during construction, the Westwood Road facade. Okay, next. This is them bringing in the big auger, and you can see they started drilling, and this was on January 28th. Next. This is another view of the same big machine that they have brought in order to drill to the proper depth of 15 feet. And they got about 6 feet down and it stopped. So let's go to the next slide. This is where they hit ledge 6 feet down. That I don't know if you can read the paper, but it's basically saying 6 feet. Next. And this is just showing the bottom of the hole that you saw a minute before. It doesn't look like much, but the auger won't go through it. Next. So the work basically had to stop at that point, and they had to go back to the drawing board, literally. And in this case, they came up with another idea of how to shore the museum. They still have to drill because they have to get down far enough in order to have the elevator pit and everything. But the shoring will now go out into the street 12 feet in a horizontal position rather than vertical. Okay, next. Okay, this just shows the current condition. I know I wrote something about there being a big hole in front of the museum, and I believe it was at the time, but this is filled and how it's been buttoned up, and work has stopped. So we're just waiting, for us to be able to go forward again. But unfortunately, we have to find the money. And the money is about exactly the same amount as we had gotten for collection care. And we thought about other things, but we are raising funds, but we don't have we're in a deficit as far as this goes. We've already depleted our contingency for various other parts of this project. And so we really don't have any recourse at this point. We are still, raising funds. We hope to raise all the funds that we need, but in order to go forward, we need to have a real source for the money, and not just our goal and pledges. So that's the end of my presentation in terms of the PowerPoint. I know you all will have a lot of questions, but and I'm open to that. I hope that I've made the request clear, both in the letter that I wrote to you all and now, of course, being here, I'll answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Do folks have questions?
Are there any questions?
So, Barbara, I assume you have a geotech involved in the project who's making these recommendations? Barbara? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, Heather, I can hear you. Barbara, did you hear Heather's question?
I'm not hearing anyone.
Huh.
Oh, okay. I had turned my sound down because I was getting feedback. Sorry.
Okay. Heather, can you ask again?
I was asking about whether that you have a geotechnical consultant involved who's making these recommendations.
We have a structural engineer who's making the recommendations, and Stack Design Build has a structural engineer, and then there's a structural engineer that we're using with Peter Quinn Architects. It's actually the Stack Build Design Build engineer who recommended this. We do not have a geotechnical. We don't have a geotechnical engineer. They seem to feel that this, they feel very comfortable with the way that we're going to progress. They do have to get a building, well, not a building permit, but they have to get a permit from the city in order to go into the street. And it is a big project because they have to go out for, 12 feet. And then, so they have to dig up the street. It'll only take, though, between 3 and 5 days, according to them. And so I think although this will be kind of uncomfortable, it's not going to be terrible. It'll be over pretty quickly.
My teeth calling. I had a question. In your letter on the 17th last week, you said you were requesting the permit. Now, is that the permit that you referenced in your presentation tonight? Have you received that at this point for the street permit to do the work?
No, we have not received the street permit. We knew it was going to be slow, but we're hoping that we will receive it very, very soon and hope to actually start next week. We have gotten approval from traffic and parking, and that was the part that we were most concerned about, but that actually has been approved. So right now, I'm not quite sure where it is in the city system, but we're
okay. Okay. And so your letter, it indicates that there's what, a $2,400 additional funds needed on top. You're asking to reallocate or change the scope of these services for the grant that you have from us, and an additional $2,400. Is that right?
I am not asking for the additional 2,400. With the 2,400, it'll be, I think, the 88,000, whatever. And,
okay.
I feel confident we can raise that other 1,000. But, we can't raise the 88,000.
Okay, so this is strictly just a request to allow you to reallocate the funds to this other use.
That's right.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Other questions?
It's a procedural question. Since these funds haven't been approved yet, can we, Judith, can you weigh in on the process of what we're doing here?
Yeah, so these funds were approved by the full council on February 11th. So what was pending was the contract, the grant agreement that we wanted to start on, but we couldn't because if they need to change the scope of work, then we have the CPC has to recommend this to the city council, and they have to again approve it.
So what would the process be if we were to make changes?
I mean, the same way, like you would recommend this, the change to the city council. The city council would send it to the finance committee that would discuss it, and if it's approved, send it back to the full council to vote.
Okay, and there's no reason to think that they wouldn't, given the circumstances.
Well, I can't speak for the city council,
Sure.
but if the CPC recommended, it's very rare that the city council rejects your recommendation.
Right.
Well, this makes sense to me that we transfer the funds from the previous allocation for collection, conservation and care across to continuing this work. But I do have a question for Barbara in that you had stressed when we first discussed the conservation and care how important it was to be able to do some of this work whilst the work was being done for the elevator. What are your plans for the conservation and care then, given that there would be no CPC funding for the conservation and care?
That is a very good question. So the elevator is the highest priority, so that's why it's taking precedence. But it does leave us with a big dilemma. We don't want to be bringing back all the collections that are off-site into the same storage conditions that they went, that they just came out of, and that were not very good. So we are writing grants right now to different foundations to try and get money for the collection care projects. We're also trying to, there's another foundation that seems like they are interested in this and could give a significant amount of money, but it also looks like, we're basically trying to finish out the elevator project, and then we're moving into this collection care project. And so we're just kind of transferring our efforts into this other project once, it's kind of like having one strategic plan that then morphs into a different strategic plan. And so we are actively fundraising for it. We have a foundation that could give a fair amount of money that's invited us to apply in July. But again, these projects are going to mean that we may have to keep the collections off-site longer. Fortunately, through Gentle Giant, that this is where we have the collections stored, and they've been really good to us. So despite us having about 20 different containers out there of the over 3,000 objects, they're charging us about $1,400 a month. And so I think what we'll be doing is probably just keeping the collections off or starting to bring them back a little at a time. We may have to reduce the scope of what we can do for the collections, but we will make sure that at least whatever we do, it's going to be a lot better than it was when they left. But yeah, it's an issue.
I'd just like to add that in the essence of true transparency, I have been a member of the library for some years. However, I'm not currently a member.
You mean the museum? Of the museum?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
You mean of the museum? Or you said the
Yes.
library? Did you?
No, the museum. The museum.
Okay, thank you for that. I would agree with what Alan said, that this seems a reasonable request under the circumstances. Are there other comments or questions from folks? If not, does somebody want to make a motion to approve Barbara's request?
I'll move that.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion moved by Alan. I'm sorry, was that Christina who seconded it? Or Tatiana?
No, me, Tatiana. Hi.
Sorry.
Although Christina
Thank
might
you.
have also.
Okay. Okay. All in favor? Or maybe I have to do a roll call, sorry. Heather?
Yes, I.
And Andrew?
No.
Tatiana?
Aye.
Christina?
Yes.
Eleanor?
Yes.
Alan?
Aye.
And Jahan?
Aye.
And I put myself as a yes, so it passes 9-0. Thank you, Barbara, for the time.
Thank you.
And
For the
Sorry,
record, I voted.
I
I
think
voted
Andrew,
no.
no. Andrew, did you say no?
That is correct. I voted
oh,
no.
I'm so sorry. I misheard. Thank you, Judith. Okay,
So it's 8-1.
8-1.
I mean,
Okay, sorry.
It's 7-1 because we're missing a public
We're
member.
missing a member. Okay. Okay, thank you, Judith.
Well,
Okay,
if there's nothing else, then I'll excuse myself. And thank you again very much for your continued support of the Somerville Museum.
Thank you, Barbara.
Bye-bye.
okay. Then next on the agenda, we have a request by Somerville Community Corporation for a new configuration at 35 Richardson Street.
Yes, and
Yes,
we
hi
have
there.
some reason. Yeah.
Thank you, Judith. Sorry about that. Thank you all for having me. My name is Sam Latronica. I'm the new real estate director at Somerville Community Corporation. I've been there for about 6 months now. And I've been getting caught up on this plan that had existed before I joined and trying to progress it forward. So thank you, Judith. This is just what I wanted to show. So, doing my own digging and getting sort of up to date from the previous staff, and Judith was kind enough to share with me some minutes from previous meetings. I was able to sort of put together the story of this parcel, but some of the details have changed. So right now what we had initially proposed was that this lot at 3135 Richardson would be split down the middle, north to south, so it would create 2 lots on the east and west side of this. Judith, are you able to rotate the view counterclockwise by 1? I think if you go to view up in the upper left corner and then go rotate, yeah, counterclockwise. Oop.
One more.
Well, one more, yeah, one more. Thanks. Sorry about that. I can't, no matter how many times I save it like this, I can't get it to stay like this. But yeah, so we had initially had conceived of this as being split, directly north-south with 2 lots on one on the east and one on the west, and the lot on the west on the corner of Richardson and Hinckley would be open space, and the CPC graciously committed money towards that in 2018, which allowed us to make this acquisition. The one on the right was there's a single family home that you can see there that was going to remain, and then we were going to construct another 2-family home on the back part of the lot. That was, that was a few years ago, and I think a number of things have changed, notably the city's zoning code, and we've had some since November or December. I think I've been meeting with Sarah Lewis and Dan Bartman, and you've had some connection with some folks at ISD around whether or not subdividing that in the way we had initially intended would still be code compliant under the new zoning code. And the determination that we collectively came to was that it would not, but there's a sort of a new proposal that Dan and Sarah were very gracious with their time as well and helped us brainstorm new configurations. So we went through a few different iterations, but what you see in front of you is the configuration that we've all sort of agreed upon as capturing the spirit of the original configuration, with being able to put some open space, excuse me, on the corner of Richardson and Hinckley. But the configuration itself has changed, and notably the open space is smaller than was initially conceived. This, is sort of, I think, the best case scenario in terms of being able to pursue this subdivision and subsequent, disposition of different lots and development as of right, without needing any sort of zoning relief via variance or anything of that nature. It would allow us to produce one additional unit on this horizontal lot that you can see at the top there that borders the neighboring property, and it would still allow us to create some open space that we would then transfer to the city. So this, the point of this is not so much a request, but it's more of a request for initial feedback and input from everyone here. This is something that had to change because of the new zoning and the sort of the constraints, the physical constraints of the site, frankly. So we've come up with what we think is the best case solution for this site, but we'd love to hear your feedback and your thoughts, and we're sort of at we're at a basically a preliminary stage where this is the subdivision plan we've come up with, and now we need to advance things forward, but we thought this would be a good opportunity to hear feedback from you all.
Okay, thank you. This feels like almost like an update of sorts, because you've had a
right,
change
exactly,
in
yeah.
the scope of the project, and you're bringing that to our attention and bouncing it off us, kind of to go forward with our blessing, right?
Yep.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Sam?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I find your diagram very difficult to understand. Could you actually, in more detail, show us how the subdivision would work?
Yes, I apologize. Is there a way to share my cursor, or if not, I can share my own screen, because I do have this file on my computer as well.
I'm going to make you the presenter. Make sure after
Okay.
you make me the presenter.
So yeah, I mean, to your point, I think can everyone see this?
Yes.
So to your point, yeah, this is not, because this is sort of in an infancy stage. This is not a full clean lot subdivision plan or a survey. This is the survey that we got I think 2 years ago, that I've drawn on to scale to illustrate what we're proposing. So initially the proposal was this line that starts here. Can everyone see my cursor as it moves?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
This line as it starts here would have been extended all the way to the lot line. So to back up, we own this large square right here in the middle. Originally, the conception was this lot line right here would subdivide the two parcels. This one on the left would be open space. This one on the right would be housing, and it would retain its single family home here. And then we would construct an additional 2 units here. And this is really where we ran into the trouble with zoning, was we couldn't find a way to construct 2 units here that would be code compliant with the new zoning ordinance. So we had some other ideas. We thought maybe we'll put the housing here, and then we'll have a park that goes deeper into that, but that didn't really work. So we ended up settling on this configuration, where this new square of 36,000 plus square feet would be the open space on the corner. So it would still retain that nice corner feel to it, which is a goal of ours, and the zoning team as well. This new sort of odd shaped parcel that looks like a little bit like Utah, but in a mirror, would be subdivided, and it would stay this single family home, and it would be sold as such. Then this other lot right here is a new rectangle lot that would be large enough to allow the construction of a triple decker home under the NR zoning ordinance or zoning designation. So this would ultimately become a triple decker on this site around here. Whether we would develop that ourselves or divest of that property to another developer to develop a triple decker remains to be seen. We need to do some more work internally to figure out exactly what who was best poised to do that. But regardless, it doesn't necessarily affect the size or the configuration of this open space parcel.
So whereas originally you were planning to just subdivide the lot into 2 lots, now you're planning to subdivide the lot into 3 lots. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Do you have any kind of memo or letter of support from planning and zoning?
No. This is a result of our conversations with them, but we don't have we haven't put this forth and through any sort of formal proposal or formal process with them.
Will that be required to get this through?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll need to,
Okay.
in order to subdivide it, we absolutely will. But this is like I think I don't know exactly when we came up with this proposal, but it was within the last few weeks, and now just like I mentioned earlier, trying to get feedback on it.
So question, the area where the garage is currently situated, that would remain with the single family home?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
All right. And the other question is, if you're building a triple decker, how does that fit with the 25% inclusionary?
I believe, I don't 100% off the top of my head, but I believe with the construction of triple decker in NR, one of the 3 units needs to be affordable.
Yeah.
Okay, I can look that up quickly, but I believe that's correct.
Because I think you need 4 units, don't you, to be affordable, to get an affordable unit?
Maybe I'm wrong. I apologize. In my mind, I thought that was the rule, but well, yeah, that's certainly part of what we'll need to look up moving forward. Alan, it looks like you're not on mute, but I can't hear anything that you're saying. I don't know if anyone else can.
So you're planning to get 4 units out of a triple decker?
3 units out of a triple decker.
Okay, and you don't know how the inclusionary for affordable housing would work on that?
Honestly, I did think it was 1 and 3 needed to be affordable, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Let me see if I can look it up.
Well, I think it's 1 and 4, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong, other people. Sarah, am I right or wrong?
Judith, if you don't mind, and Madam Chair, if you don't mind, Sarah White, I'm a senior planner in the Planning and Zoning Office. So while I'm not working on this, in the NR district, and that's where this is, right, Sam?
Yep.
Yep. So in the NR district, it allows for 2 units, and if you want to have 3, the third has to be affordable.
Yep. And here it is right
under
here.
Normal development circumstances, yes.
Yep. And here, so can you still see this exact PDF that I've got?
Yes.
So this is the residential district for NR. This is the detached triple decker, which is what we would be pursuing. And as you can see, dwelling lots, if you have 3, then 1 needs to be an affordable one.
Okay.
So,
Sorry.
Chair,
I could picture that chart in my head. I just wasn't positive yet.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I just wanted to mention to the committee that I think the interest should be mostly on the open space, because this is where the funding went into. They're asking, the configuration reduces the size of the original parcel. So I think that's where some wants some guidance.
Yep. I'm sorry. Can everyone hear me now?
Now we can.
Yes.
So just to set the context for the committee, I think, Sam and SEC have been kind enough to provide us an update tonight while they haven't fully flushed out their plans. But just to set the stage for the future, when they do have a final proposal to both the city and the CPC, because the original project was voted with a certain proportion of housing to open space, the committee will have to approve the new project and, either can set new conditions, rescind some of the funding. It'll open up the discussion, and it will require CPC approval of the new proposal with the new open space to housing proportions.
So does that mean tonight we're not necessarily voting on anything? We're just taking this in, right?
Correct. I mean, I defer to Sam, but I think it would not make much sense to vote on anything tonight if they don't have final plans.
I'm not requesting a vote of any kind. No.
Okay. I mean, I think that to Judith's point, the most notable thing in the letter was the decrease in open space. It went from, I believe, 0.13 acres to 0.086. So, it's that's the loss here that we just have to note for the record, I think.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add that from an open space perspective, this outcome would be very disappointing, and that it maybe reflects a lack of due diligence during that initial submission.
I can't speak to the due diligence conducted during the initial submission, given that it was a number of years ago. But again, part of my understanding is that the change in the zoning code perhaps altered, what was feasible on the site. But I can't speak definitively to that, having not been here.
Right. So it's hard to know, I guess, for Sam, whether it was due diligence versus the change in the regs. It sounds like is what I'm hearing.
I honestly just can't speak definitively. I apologize, but since I've been here, this is where we are, and this configuration, like I said, has resulted from my direct conversations with the zoning department.
Okay.
And Sam, just to make sure I understand correctly, is the single family home going to be affordable housing?
The single family home will not be affordable housing, no. That was not, unless that we can secure some additional funding for that. But I think that was always conceived of as being sold as a market rate unit in order to sort of make up, some of the funds necessary to pay back the loan that we took out on this. So I believe I'm 99% sure that in the original proposal that it was listed as being a market rate unit.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, just so everyone knows the full context, was there some historical components or considerations with the single family?
I didn't realize that until I reviewed the minutes that Judith had sent me earlier. That was news to me as of today. So it looked like there was possibly some discussion around pursuing a historical designation for that single family home. I don't, like I said, that I had only heard of that earlier this afternoon, so I'm not sure where that went. But we can look into that, certainly.
So I guess part of the question that's being asked is if this remaining parcel in the corner, if that still has value as a CPC funded open space project. And so the question that I ask is, if we were to say no, what would that do to your overall plans?
If you were to say no to funding this as open space, then we would re-examine how to construct more affordable housing on this site.
That's another buildable lot. I assume all three of these, it's another
I think
buildable lot.
I frankly don't know if that, I assume it is, but I'm not positive because I haven't looked at it because we've been conceptualizing it as open space. So if that lot were buildable on its own, we could pursue that, or perhaps we subdivide it a certain way and we only create 2 lots instead of 3, and then one is a larger lot that we can produce more affordable housing on. So we haven't explored that that scenario.
Well, I agree with Andrew that, it's a shame to lose open space since that's at such a premium as well as affordable housing. But, I would suggest at the point when you come back for a formal approval that, the funding that we originally gave towards open space be subtracted to be proportional to what's actually there. I would say that space still has, if that's all that stays open space, that still has value. It would be ideal.
I would really like to hear from planning and zoning based on the original proposal, what the most optimal outcome would be from a planning perspective to accomplish both the affordable housing and open space goals.
Sorry, I'm not sure I quite understand. So you're looking for
I think it would be very helpful to understand from the city's planning and zoning staff their perspective on the most optimal lot layout to accomplish maximizing open space while also providing for the affordable housing goals.
I see. So you're talking about, city-specific priorities, essentially?
I mean, you said that you talked specifically with Dan Bartman and Sarah Lewis about this proposal, but there's no evidence of those conversations or their recommendations.
I fully hear that. Yeah, we're certainly happy to include them in the conversation. No questions asked. I just I get, yeah. So I suppose it comes down to, right, this is the configuration that they propose that would allow for not the exact original conception, certainly, but we felt like the best way to capture the spirit of it, to get a large open space lot on that corner, to still be able to produce some few additional units of housing and not have to go through any protracted zoning relief process through a variance. That would require a much longer process and violate you're not immediately as of right conform with the new zoning code. So this was their proposed compromise for that. In terms of the priorities of what the committee finds more valuable, the more open space or one extra unit of housing and not going through the zoning relief process, is up to all of you.
Right.
I hope that's helpful. I hope that sort of addressed what you're saying. But of course, yeah, we're happy to include Dan and Sarah in the conversations and bring any sort of letter that you'd like to see.
Yeah, and maybe just bring back to zoning to keep in mind that this is a loss in open space. Obviously, you recognize that in your note, but that could impact committee members' commitment level, right, in terms of the funding going forward. And maybe there's
Absolutely.
a way. I wonder if there's a way to reconfigure the plans once again. If zoning could do that, I'm not sure. Maybe this is it.
We're always happy to revisit it. This was the best we could come up with after multiple iterations. But like I said, happy to revisit it again.
Okay. Any other?
Yeah, we ran out of time. We still have 2 presentations, actually 3.
Okay, and so since we're not voting, if there's no last comments, I'm going to move that we take on the next agenda item. I'm going to suggest that. And
Okay.
Sam, thanks for your time.
Thank you also. So I will follow up with Judith separately, but I'll reach back out to zoning and work to refine these plans and keep you all posted.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for your time and have a good night.
Okay. And so now we're going to have a presentation from Sarah and Alan on the historic preservation resources.
Yes, Sam, if you could make me the presenter.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that. How do I think I got it. Great. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So, Sarah and Ellen, you're going to take it away?
Yes.
Oops.
This looks like, Sarah, is this your slide?
It is.
I'll after Sarah, I will put up your slide, Alan.
Okay.
All right. I assume everyone can see that just fine. It looks absolutely enormous to me, but I hope everybody's okay with it. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me present as well. So my name is Sarah White. I'm a different Sarah than the one that was spoken about in the last presentation. Sarah White, I'm a senior planner in the Planning and Zoning Office, and I am a zoning planner, but I'm also a historic preservation planner as well. So I work very closely with Alan on a regular basis and with Judith as well on historic preservation proposals that come before the CPC. So I wanted to do a couple of things for you tonight. The first being, if I can actually, if my down button will actually work. Let's see, hold on. Oh, how embarrassing.
You can tap in the slide and then try to move it again.
There we go. Okay, wonderful. So I want to do 2 things. And one thing I've never done before, which is explain to you really briefly, what does preservation planning do? Because I will guarantee you that probably 99% of my colleagues also don't realize what I do. And so one of them is actually here tonight. So he's actually gonna learn a little bit more about one of the other departments. And the other thing is preservation planning in the CPC. So how do we work with the CPC? Okay, there is a lot that we do. So at the risk of reading, we provide all of the regulatory analysis to the Historic Preservation Commission for all projects coming in for demolition that have a historic component if they're over a certain age, and all projects involving alterations to local historic district properties. So in total, this is about 100 plus cases that we work on a year. We provide support to the Historic Preservation Commission. We attend all the meetings, we do all their agendas, we help them with, Robert's rules, open meeting laws, and things of that nature. We write all the case decisions. We negotiate memorandum of agreement, and that is something where when somebody wants to demolish a property and the demolition delay is put on that property, there are alternative means of preservation that we can come up with sometimes. Maybe you salvage component parts, you take photographs, architectural drawings, or we come up with a proposal where you can use that project, that building creatively in a new zoning project. So we work with demo applicants, again, on zoning and preservation solutions. I have a few of those going on right now. We write legislation, and we work very closely with the counselors. We work on legal issues. I've testified in court cases. We had another court case come before the HPC with the zoning component as well. So we really get involved in the nitty gritty. We provide consultation to the public and applicants, and this takes up quite a bit of our time actually. And we review all preservation restrictions and all preservation applications for the CPC. And so this is where I work really hand in glove with Judith. We work collaboratively with Judith and the special counsel. Some recent and ongoing projects in addition to what we do on a regular basis. We have an updated demolition review ordinance that Alan will also talk to you about in a bit. That passed after 4 years of work between work with the commission, work with the counselors, and work internally with planning staff. And you'll excuse the typo, but we have a local historic district, LHD, small grants fund rollout that Judith and I are working on. So what types of projects that involve preservation have come in front of the CPC? Some of you are very familiar with some of them. We've had preservation of election records. That was a pure preservation project. The Somerville Museum, you know about that, their collection, and now that's been changed as of tonight. There's a Works Progress Administration bas relief that's being restored at the library. That was one of the first, that was at the very front slide that I had. And we have the Mystic Waterworks. This is one of the types of projects that I personally, as a preservation planner, prefer the most because it's what I call a blended project. It's a project that involves historic preservation, but it involves something, in this case, affordable housing. It could be historic preservation and open space. It could be all three, but my feeling is that there's great public benefit to each of these categories individually, but there's, I think, a much greater public benefit when we can really work together and find a blended project that we can work on with CPA money, excuse me. This is the bas relief that's being restored in the library. I know none of us have been in a library at all in the past year or so, but this is a hand carving that's now being restored. There have been restoration of grave markers at the Milk Row Cemetery. I don't know if you all know, but this cemetery is really old. It's from 1804. Milk Row is what Somerville Avenue used to be called. So that's why it is Milk Row Cemetery. So the Mystic Waterworks. So the above photo is what it looked like before restoration, and below is what it looked like after restoration. And it is now 25 units of affordable senior housing. So these are the types of projects I really, really like to see. So what do we do in helping you and helping the city protect the public investment? For preservation restrictions that need to go on historic preservation projects. The preservation restrictions are legally binding, they're in perpetuity. The entire exterior envelope of a building needs to be covered. It needs to be executed prior to the CPA funds being distributed. Future changes to a building require compliance with that restriction. We have an applicant coming in right now. It's a local historic district property, but it has a preservation restriction. So as the preservation planner, I need to balance those two things and make sure that they all work together and dovetail, and then present my findings to the commission. All the preservation restrictions are held by the city unless it's a preservation restriction on a city property, because the city cannot hold a preservation restriction against itself. How does that get enforced? That's really in a nutshell what we do. If you have any questions, this is my contact information. Judith told me I had 10 minutes and I talk really fast like a New Englander, so I really hope I made it under the time, and she hasn't buzzed me yet, so I think that's a yes.
Thank you, Sarah. So Chair, I would request that Alan makes his presentation and then the committee can ask questions to both of them.
Very good. Can you unshare me?
Yeah, can you make me the presenter?
Sure, you would ask me to do something like responsible and technical. Yes, hold on, folks, just give me a second. Let me figure this out.
If you go to where everyone is, you see my name, then you can make me the presenter.
Thank you for telling me that.
Okay, these look like my slides. So I'm the chair of the commission, and we brought forth a number of different innovations as we've been moving forward. Can you put up the next slide, please, Judith? The innovations we've got are several. As Sarah mentioned, the demolition review ordinance has changed, and that changed for several reasons. It changed primarily because the language was confusing, and the lawyers always had a lot of fun being creative in how they interpreted the language, which made things difficult for management. So, for instance, what is a demolition? What constitutes demolition? How far can you go? So basically, it's clarified the language, but the other thing it's done is it's changed two important factors, I believe. One is that we moved from any structure that was over 50 years old to over 75 years old, which basically means anything that was before World War II comes under our purview, but anything that's past that, after that, doesn't. So we're looking at the historic component of 75 years or older. And the other thing that's changed is that the demolition review period has gone from 9 months to 12 months. So what does that mean? It means that if somebody comes before the commission and says, I have this building, I'm a developer, I bought this building, sure, it's a pretty looking building, it was just a junky old workman's cottage, but I want to demolish it and put something else up. Well, we can't determine in the commission as to what goes up, but what we can do is we can work with them to come to a meeting of the minds as to what's going to happen. And part of what we look at is in a demolition is not just preserving the wonderful big Queen Anne buildings, but also the modest little workers' cottages and everything in between, because they're all part of the historic fabric of the city. So the demolition review ordinance, it's actually 5 years that we actually started discussing this with the councillors, but it's been a long process. We also, in working with the planning department, worked on the CPC application process for local historic districts. Now, this item's pretty important because often we get people coming before us who are looking to do something which is essential or necessary. It might be replacement of a roof. And it could be a slate roof they want to replace or repair. But what they want to do is they've followed the builders and said they're going to tear off the triple tab, these, and put up triple tabs. And we say, actually, no, you've got to put back slate and you've got to do this properly. And so the CPC application, this is for small projects up to $15,000, where we can look at helping people in need financially to be able to restore their buildings properly. And this only applies to local historic districts. It doesn't apply to everybody out there. And that's the small grants. And the other thing is we're trying to shift the Historic Preservation Commission from a reactive body into more of a consultative body. And Sarah touched on this. When people come in, they say, I'd like to do something, we can talk to them about what their project is. Now, Sarah and the planning staff will talk to them about what they can do. And then we have on the commission a number of architects, realtors, a wide, broad knowledge base where we can help people to make the right decisions. And we've made right decisions. I think as we look at some of the things that we've been able to do is renegotiate with some people to, for instance, I think it's 585 Somerville Avenue, where they wanted to demolish a little, very old workers' cottage, early 18th century or late 18th century workers' cottage. And we arranged for them to not only not demolish it, but to move it to new foundations and still be able to redevelop the site and get everything they wanted. Plus, they got an extra building out of it. So there's things like this, we can become a consultative body because generally people only come to us when there's something to do. Okay, next slide, please, Judith. So basically this talks about the things that we've done. I think these are the three big keys here, but the language is terribly important. I don't believe that going from 9 months to 12 months makes a big impact. When I initially started working with the mayor on this, a number of years ago, I'd initially suggested 7 years. He nearly had a heart attack. But we've got 12 months, and that seems to be pretty standard for Massachusetts. We'll see how that goes. Next slide, please, Judith. So the other thing is, we've noticed since I've been on the commission that we've had a number of cases come before us which have been difficult to understand. And I'm thinking of several of them. The Somerville Hispanic, which is in the old Grace Baptist Church, and Vida Real, the bell tower. And these are organizations that have come before the commission, the CPC, wanting a grant with a good-looking application, but they haven't come before the Historic Preservation Commission to get that consultative basis. And when I look at this, two problems I see with this is several-fold. Firstly, when we went back and looked at, for instance, the Somerville Hispanic, their recent application was to replace the doors to the church. Well, the doors are actually the historic doors. The doors can be restored. So from a Historic Preservation Commission perspective, we would strongly endorse restoring the doors, the original doors, rather than replacing them. And as far as Vida Real, everybody's concerned, basically that is also on the National Register. So what we've got there is they wanted the bell tower to have some of the slates replaced with a synthetic slate initially. Well, we said no to them at the Historic Preservation Commission. It's got to be proper slate. I mean, this is a valuable building to the city. It's a unique building in Massachusetts. So coming before us and looking at the process, and what I'd like to do is see some of these things change. For instance, the application form, a new checkbox to add to say, has been reviewed and approved by Somerville Historic Preservation Commission. And this is important for designated structures, which are city, state, and nationally designated. And sometimes in the language, people don't know. They might see that it's national or it's city and state. But what we're looking at here is city, state, and national. So all of those things can qualify as far as we're concerned. The next slide, please. These are suggestions. So the small grants, I put down here $10,000, but we actually have, after discussions with George Proakis and Sarah and the people in planning, up to $15,000, but we don't want to mention that. We have a budget of up to $150,000 a year. We have never spent that amount of money, and it only applies to local historic districts. Next slide, please. And the shifting to a consultative body, I think, is terribly important, because sometimes people come to us and it's too late. For instance, imagine if the people at Vida Real had come before us first and said, we want to replace these. And then all of a sudden, we would have gone through this with them up front. Instead of coming here to the CPC, and then at the CPC, we say, wait a minute, haven't come before the Historic Preservation Commission yet. So putting these into a sequence in the process makes sense. It cuts out a lot of administrative process, and it simplifies things for the applicants. They know the steps they have to take. Right at present, we're trying to work through, for instance, with Somerville Hispanic on Grace Baptist Church, exactly what's been done and what hasn't been done in previous grants from the CPC. Some of these things are a little bit vague. And so we're trying to come to grips with that. If we had nailed these down up front, it would have been much easier to come to grips with these. So working more as a consultative body, being able to put the process in place up front is something that's terribly important. And I think I'd like to echo something that Sarah said. There's a sense that we get at times that people think affordable housing and historic preservation are at odds with each other. They're not. We know about the Broadway House. The Broadway House is a local historic district and affordable housing for disabled people. I think everybody on the Historic Preservation Commission is firmly committed to the ideals of the CPC. And where we can see a reuse of a structure to be an affordable building with affordable housing in it, this is something that we pursue. And this goes back to what Sarah was saying about this 12-month period we have with the demolition review to be able to negotiate with the applicant, come to a meeting of the minds as to how that's going to be used, what's going to happen to that particular building. So that's basically my presentation. It's very simple. We've made some big steps forward. We've got a lot of little processes involved now that we can use to enhance these things. And it's just a matter of getting these implemented and tidying up a few details so that we can get this process to be slick and effective and known to everybody. So there's no constructive, innovative legal arguments that come up. It's all spelled out up front. So thank you for that. Any questions?
Yeah, so I wanted to start by also sort of giving information to the committee as they think about the questions. So Alan's request, I think, is valid, where we need to have the historic preservation projects go before the HPC. But I also wanted to remind the CPC of the timeline. When you look at our calendars, the time when we get to the eligibility determination form, sometimes it's just a week to the CPC meeting. So that means as we discuss the future of how we want to do this, that means we may have to have delays, like some discussions have to happen a month after. But of course, then you have to be mindful of the delays in awarding this project. So I just wanted to raise that and see how we can, how the CPC can help make sure that the HPC has given their input and the CPC is comfortable discussing the projects, but also have them timely approved. Thank you.
Well, Judith, one of the things that I think we're trying to do is cut out those delays. We're trying to make it so that we can front-end load all the stuff we need to front-end load, so that when it comes to actually the process of the Historic Preservation Commission, we meet the third Tuesday in the month, and the CPC meets on the fourth Wednesday in the month. That gives a week. But you don't need documentation to come before the CPC if you have it approved. That can follow, so long as we have it done. And there's nothing worse than having somebody have to come back and then wait for 3 weeks to go and see the Historic Preservation Commission to try and get approval for something. So I think cutting out that time delay is something that we're exceptionally focused on.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, but I also want to remind the chair, one of my jobs as vice chair is to be a little bit of a clock keeper. So if we want to stay on schedule, we have to not dwell too long on this conversation. But I do have a question for Sarah and Alan, which is, it sounds like you identify perhaps an issue in terms of the sort of follow through of seeing whether or not the CPC funds are spent properly on the historic preservation projects. Is that, can you speak some more about that and how we could improve our processes?
Well, from my perspective, and if we go back to the Somerville Hispanic at Grace Church, they came before the CPC to have funding to have the doors removed and replaced, new doors made. Well, that was something that was not approved by the HPC. So we'd like to make sure that everything that the CPC approves for historic preservation is something that is actually kosher as far as the historic preservation is concerned.
And if
I think I think there's a pretty stringent audit process to make sure that money allocated is actually spent, and the follow-ups in that through the city is actually done very effectively. But we need to make sure that people are doing things that are appropriate.
And if I could dovetail on Alan's response as well, one of the things with the Grace Baptist Church is that they are a local historic district already. So that means they fall under review regulations by the Historic Preservation Commission. So they are required to come in and have any changes that they're making to the exterior of the building approved by the HPC ahead of time. I think one of the challenges might have been with the architectural firm. I think things maybe got a little bit out of sync. And the architectural firm that's sort of doing like the planning, the programming, the scheduling, and the implementation. So I think things got a little bit out of sync with them. And then really the scope of their project, from things that were approved a couple of years ago to what they're now looking to add on to it. I think that just the architectural firm could have done a better job really compartmentalizing what had already been approved, what had been executed, what was new, and what were they looking for approval for. So those are things then now that I will work with them on to say, okay, these are the challenges that we have with what you presented. This is what I need you to do to clean it up. So that I think, and probably had their timing been better from when they submitted their application, they submitted it a bit backwards where they really should have come to the HPC first, simply because they're a local historic district. And with anybody looking for preservation funds, it's not a local historic district. Judith would then send them over to me and have them come in for an advisory review anyhow. So, and I believe that when it comes to how money is spent, you know, certainly everything has to be submitted to Judith for her to approve and review. But, you know, actually looking at having you don't want it to be a post-mortem review, you know, after the project is completely done and closed up, but, you know, perhaps interim site visits, reviews or inspections. And when I say inspections, I don't mean ISD, but I mean somebody in the historic realm to look at it while it's ongoing to make sure it's going according to plan. It might not be a bad thing to think about implementing.
And I thought I heard Alan suggest that maybe as part of any application, CPC application for historic preservation money, there'd be a checkbox that has this been presented to the Historic Preservation Committee yet? Yes, no, or maybe have that be a requirement even, right? Is that?
Yeah, because that would give Judith an immediate heads up as to whether or not they've seen us, and so it would actually make things. Well, I shouldn't speak for Judith and say what would make her job easier, but it might make it a little bit, you know, smoother, you know, when you're going through a multitude of applications to actually be able to see that and have them be like a really quick review for her to do and say, oh, Sarah, you've got to take a look at this, or, oh, you've got to go to the HPC.
Yeah, and we can include this information in the application materials so they are aware that they need to go before the CPC. I mean, the HPC before the CPC.
So that's fairly easy to implement, right, Judith? That addition or change? Yeah. Okay, great.
I'm just wondering, should that be in the eligibility determination form or the actual application? Because if it was in the earlier form, that would give more time.
Yeah, in the eligibility determination stage, yes.
Great question. Thank you. I want to be mindful of the time and ask one more time if there's comments or questions, and if not, move on to the conservation presentation.
Sina, do you want me to put up your presentation or do you want me to share the screen?
If you could make me the presenter.
Okay.
So are you seeing my screen?
Not yet.
No.
Judith,
if you can share it, can you share the screen?
It's still saying that it's I'm not able to.
You're not able to?
Can you try again? I think it might be a setting on my computer.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, you're already the presenter. so I can't send it.
Oh,
But
okay.
you see the share screen? If you can click on share screen.
Yeah, sorry, I have to change a setting on my computer. And I'm gonna have to rejoin the meeting. Very sorry about this. I'll be right back.
Okay.
The joys of Zoom meetings.
So can we move to the next item as she's arrived.
Okay.
So
And I
can
think
I
you'll
make
have to be the presenter again.
okay. I could share your presentation if that's failing. Okay, let me share.
Yeah, why don't you share my presentation? I'm so sorry about that.
No, it's okay.
It's no problem over Zoom, but for some reason. And
Okay.
could you make it full screen?
Yes.
Great. So I apologize for the technical difficulties.
It's okay.
So I'm just going to give an overview, and I have a lot of pictures and not much text. So hopefully that will make up for the annoying technical difficulties. So I am on the Somerville Conservation Commission. Like the CPC, this is a commission made up of volunteers. We have 7 members, and we work with our conservation agent, Malik Drayton, who works for the city. So you can go to the next. So this is just a basic history of the Conservation Commission. So Massachusetts was the state that developed this model of having local conservation commissions. That started with the Conservation Commission Act in 1957. And at that time, the mandate was really to protect and manage open spaces. So from the legislation, the point of the Conservation Commission was promotion and development of the natural resources and protection of watershed resources. And conservation commissions still will acquire and manage natural lands in other communities where there is more open space and areas. And then in 1972, the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act was created, and that gave the Conservation Commission the responsibility at the town or city level to enforce the Wetlands Protection Act. So that really gave Concom's regulatory authority focused on the protection of wetlands and waterways. So we do this by issuing permits for work that's done in wetland resource areas. So for example, any construction, large construction projects. So you can go to the next slide. So a lot of people are probably thinking Somerville has wetlands. And yes, Somerville, in the definition of the Wetlands Protection Act, does have many wetlands. And basically the Conservation Commission were really focused on the Alewife Brook and Mystic River, and then land bordering those rivers and streams. So we have what we call riverfront areas, which is 25 feet from the river boundary that we have jurisdiction over. Then we have jurisdiction over land under water bodies, which basically means the river or the brook, the banks of the river, land subject to flooding, and also any wetland vegetation that's growing along the sides and banks of the river. And then when I moved to Somerville, I didn't actually realize that Somerville is a coastal community, even though we don't often think of ourselves that way. But below the Amelia Earhart Dam, it's a marine environment along the Mystic River. And so we also focus on projects that are doing any work in that area, which would be land under ocean, land containing shellfish, coastal banks. We have a rocky intertidal shoreline at Dross-Evan Park. And we also have anadromous or migratory fish runs that go up the Mystic River. And for those that don't know, the Mystic River actually has the highest river herring run in Massachusetts. Over, I think in 2019, almost 800,000 river herring were counted in the spring, migrating up the Mystic River to spawn and lay eggs. So you can go to the next slide. So I'm just going to go kind of just give a flavor of the different types of projects that come before the Conservation Commission. So a big, long-standing project is the Assembly Square development. When the planners first went before the Conservation Commission for the original Assembly Square development, part of that plan was the creation of a new large stormwater outfall pipe. And so when the Conservation Commission permitted this pipe, one of the conditions was that the Assembly Square developers need to come back to the Conservation Commission anytime there's a change in the treatment of stormwater or how stormwater is entering that pipe. So as Assembly Square has been developed over the years, we've reviewed many of the building and parking lot design projects to review their stormwater infrastructure. You can go to the next slide. One of the recent projects was the proposed bike and pedestrian crossing going over the Mystic River from Dross-Evan Park near Assembly Square to basically the Encore Casino. So that came before us, I believe, a year and a half ago for permitting, and we reviewed that to make sure that the plans were not going to have any impacts on anadromous fish, shellfish, or the intertidal area during the construction and then after design. That project right now, I think, is on hold until funds are obtained, but that was an interesting project to review. And next slide. And then another project was the Blessing of the Bay Trail improvements. So this is a plan showing the trail improvements, and this is what we spend a lot of our time looking at plans, reviewing the tree planting plan, advocating for native species, reduction of impervious area, making sure that stormwater is adequately treated. And this was a project by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, so separate from the Blessing of the Bay work that the CPC is funding, but it's related. So next slide. And then this is a view from the Charlestown Bus Facility project. So other than the developers at Assembly Square, the major applicants we have are either DCR, the State Department of Conservation and Recreation, or the MBTA. So this is the shoreline along the Mystic of the MBTA bus station in Charlestown that borders Charlestown and Somerville. And they were shoring up their revetment, and so they came before us for permitting since this was going to be some work along the bank and then within the river. So we also do site inspections as construction is going on to make sure that the site construction is following best practices to make sure sediment is not moving or getting moved into the river. And next slide. And then we also review aquatic vegetation management plans. So this is a picture of the invasive water chestnut species that grows a lot on the Mystic River. And so the DCR and the Mystic River Watershed Association have been doing mechanical and herbicide treatment to get rid of these non-native species, and we review those management plans every year. Next slide. And then while we don't manage open space, because we, of course, in Somerville are very urban and have little natural lands, we do manage the community garden program. So the property is owned by the city, the Parks Department, but we coordinate the program and we hire a citywide community garden coordinator who has a small stipend and mostly volunteers their time to organize all of the different gardens. And at this point, we have 11 community gardens in Somerville. Next slide. And then these are a couple of projects I've been involved in since I started about 3 years ago at the Conservation Commission, but for the past 2 springs before COVID, we in the spring did a bio blitz as part of the City Nature Challenge, the Boston City Nature Challenge, and identified all species we could during a 3-day weekend. So next slide. So this is just a sampling of the I think 67 species of plants and animals that we identified at Drosshaven Park. So given that, we're in the middle of the city, that's pretty cool. Next slide. And in the past 2 falls, pre-COVID, we did a fall coast sweep cleanup at Drosshaven Park. And here, the volunteer smiling is holding a data sheet. So as volunteers are collecting trash, they're actually tallying up what they were finding. And then we sent those results to the Ocean Conservancy that collects this data worldwide. So next slide. So that's my overview. In terms of, the Conservation Commission's role with the Community Preservation Committee, really the role, the intent, and the reason why the legislation adds a Conservation Commission member to the Community Preservation Committee is the role we have in advocating for open space, and that the role that traditionally conservation commissions in more suburban or rural areas have in managing open space lands. So that's, definitely still our role in Somerville, although of course we understand that there may not be a lot of natural space to advocate for, but we would certainly advocate for parks and green spaces versus built environments. And then we certainly, you know, when projects come before us that might be within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, we would, you know, just review those in terms of making sure that, you know, there were no violations. And of course, those projects would have to formally come before the Conservation Commission as well. And I think, you know, we take a look at stormwater considerations when we're looking at development projects or building projects, park projects. So that's all I have. And thank you for listening. And sorry again for the technical challenges.
Do people have questions for Christina? Comments? Okay.
I guess I have one question for Christina, which would be similar to the one I asked Alan and Sarah, which would be, how would you look at CPC processes either before or after funds are awarded to improve them through the filter of the Conservation Commission?
Yeah, I don't, I'm thinking through as you're asking that. I mean, I think that if we saw in a project, in an application, a gross violation of, or something that was just simply not permittable in an area of jurisdiction, we would flag that in the review process. You know, it's less of a black and white situation, you know, it's not whether it's historic or not. I think that, you know, a proposed project could make changes after it was funded by CPC if there were some elements of it that, you know, the Conservation Commission wanted to change. I think there could be flexibility in that. It's something to consider whether we would want to formally review projects that came forward. But if they're only in, say, the, you know, early design, conceptual design stages, then that wouldn't be the right time to put in a formal application to the Conservation Commission. So it would depend on what stage the project is in.
Yeah, I guess the question is less from the point of view of vetting as it is from the kind of big picture aspect. And what I've wondered is, like, just like in historic preservation projects, we put a restrictive easement or a restriction on the property, but we don't do that with our open space grants. And I've wondered if we should be considering that.
Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know if I'm answering this right, but I think, Heather, we do. For the land that we acquire for open spaces, is a conservation restriction that normally the city requests. So I don't know if you're asking about the kind of restriction. And the others are public spaces, like for the schools. We've not really received like private requests for open spaces. I don't think we have so many of those.
Judith, are you saying that we do put a restriction on the open space grants so that they are in perpetuity open space?
Yes, for those that we acquire, like the 5 Palmer Street, and the other ones are normally public space, so they're already held in perpetuity, like for the schools and also like Central Hill Park.
Other questions or comments for Christina? Nice graphics on the slideshow. It was worth the wait.
Okay. I figured people would want some pictures at 8 o'clock on a Wednesday night.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Okay, if there's no other comments, we should move on to the update. The general public member update.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair, and thank you again, Alan, Sarah, and Christina for the great presentations, for taking your time to develop them. I also wanted to say that on February 2nd, the Community Preservation Committee, Select Committee, conducted interviews to fill one position of a public member on the CPC. The committee considered both professional and lived experience and commitment, at least one of these areas. And for this search, preference was given to candidates with professional experience in the construction industry or housing development. 5 candidates, very good candidates, were interviewed, and 1 finalist was selected for recommendation. And this finalist has been forwarded to the mayor, and after the approval will be submitted or recommended to the city council. So hopefully in the next meeting we will have the new member.
Okay, great. Any other business, Judith?
Yeah, I wanted to remind members about next meeting. So it's going to be an orientation training meeting. It's going to be a long meeting, so I encourage you to have your dinner. So the Conservation Preservation Coalition Executive Director will be with us. I also wanted to invite the members of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to be part of it, so we can also have an interaction. So yeah, that's the main agenda item, but depending on what comes through during next month, we may just have 1 or 2 more items, but it's going to be mostly for training purposes.
And that's Mr. Saganor, right? Who's speaking? Stuart Saganor?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was a good presentation last time. I'm looking forward to hearing it again. I think it's a really useful one. Just give a plug for it. And so the next meeting is, oh, it's easy to remember because it's the same as today, but in March 24th at 6:30. Mark your calendar.
Okay.
Okay. So I think with that, we're done with the agenda. Somebody could make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll move that.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, I hear a second. I heard from Heather and someone else I missed. Okay, then I think we can say meeting adjourned is 8:08. And thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.